A single dinner at Manhattan's L'Étoile Dorée costs more than most people make in a month. It is a fortress of wealth, a place where billionaires are forged and broken. On this night, new money titan Maximilian Krieger, a man who feasts on corporate takeovers, is here to impress. The only person standing in his way? A quiet waitress named Chiara. When Krieger decides to humiliate her in German, assuming she's just an uneducated cow, he makes a fatal mistake. He doesn't realize he's not talking to a waitress. He's just insulted the one woman on earth who holds his entire future in her hands. What happens next isn't just a comeback. It's a financial execution. The air inside L'Étoile Dorée was not just air. It was a curated atmosphere. It smelled of old money, white truffle, and a faint, floral trace of impossible-to-get reservations. The light was a soft, forgiving gold, designed to make diamonds sparkle and imperfections fade. Here, conversations were held in hushed tones, but the words exchanged could topple governments or launch new empires. Into this arena stepped Chiara. To the untrained eye, she was just another part of the impeccable decor. Her uniform, a crisp black tailored trousers and vest set, was severe but elegant. Her dark hair was pulled back into a flawless tight bun. No makeup, no jewelry, save for a simple, functional watch. She moved with an economy of motion that bordered on silent. While other servers occasionally betrayed a flicker of stress, Chiara was a pool of absolute calm. She was, by every metric, the perfect waitress. She was also a complete fabrication. Chiara was, in reality, serving the final 2 weeks of a self-imposed 1-year sentence. This sentence was the key to her entire future. 12 months prior, on her 25th birthday, the trustees of her family's estate, the colossal, ancient, and terrifyingly powerful von Strauss Legacy Fund, had presented her with her grandfather's will. He had been a man of iron, a true industrial patriarch who had rebuilt a European empire from the rubble of war. His terms were simple. To take her seat on the board, she had to prove she understood the value of labor, the sting of anonymity, and the weight of a dollar earned, not inherited. She was to live for 365 days in a foreign city under an assumed name, with no access to her family's name or fortune. She had to hold a service job and live on what she earned. If she was fired, or if she quit, she would forfeit her inheritance, and control would pass to her distant, grasping cousins. So, for 364 days, Chiara Benson had been a model employee. She'd lived in a tiny 5th-floor walk-up in Brooklyn. She'd learned to budget for a Metro card, to darn her own socks, and to absorb the casual cruelties of the ultra-rich, many of whom were, ironically, clients of her family's private bank. "Table 7 is getting agitated, Chiara," whispered Jenna, another waitress, her face pale with stress. "Mr. Dubois is watching." Chiara glanced toward the manager, a rail-thin man named Gerard Dubois, who ran the floor with the precision of a Swiss watchmaker. He didn't just see a dirty fork, he saw the intention of a fork to become dirty. "I'll handle it," Chiara said, her voice low and smooth. She took the chilled bottle of Sancerre from Jenna's trembling hand. "You check on table 4. Mrs. Henderson looks like she needs her water." Jenna nodded, grateful. "You're a lifesaver, Soph." Chiara approached table 7, where a hedge fund manager was complaining loudly that his steak was 5 degrees past medium rare. Chiara simply listened, nodded, and said, "It is unacceptable, sir. I will have a new one fired for you immediately." The man, disarmed by her lack of defensiveness, simply huffed and said, "Fine, just do it." She returned to the kitchen, presented the plate to the head chef and said, "Chef, Mr. Langley's steak. He says it's over. He seems volatile. The chef, a notoriously temperamental man, just grunted. For her, I'll do it. Chiara was the only server he didn't scream at, because she was the only one who spoke to him with the direct, technical precision he respected. As she waited, she watched the restaurant entrance. The front-of-house hostess, a tall woman named Catherine, suddenly stood straighter. A wave of energy, palpable and crass, entered the room. It was table 9, the whale of the night. 4 men entered. 3 of them were shadows, dressed in expensive but unremarkable suits, their faces blurred with the sycophantic eagerness of lieutenants. The man in the lead, however, was a supernova of arrogance. This was Maximilian Krieger. Krieger was new money, and he wanted everyone to know it. While the old money patrons of l'Étoile Dorée wore their wealth with the quiet comfort of a favorite sweater, Krieger wore his like a suit of armor. His suit was a shimmering metallic blue, his watch a blinding beacon of diamonds that looked heavy enough to be a weapon. He was loud, laughing a fraction too hard, his voice cutting through the restaurant's expensive hush. Mr. Dubois himself glided over, bowing slightly. "Mr. Krieger, a pleasure to have you back." "Dubois!" Krieger boomed, slapping the manager on the back hard enough to make him wince. "The usual table, and I've brought friends. Important friends. So, none of your C team tonight, you understand. I want your best." Dubois' thin smile didn't waver. "Of course, sir. I will have Chiara attend to you personally." Krieger grunted, already moving toward the best table in the house, a curved booth with a panoramic view of the city skyline. In the kitchen, Chiara heard the summons. She picked up the new steak for table 7, her face a mask of placid professionalism. But inside, her stomach tightened. She knew Krieger. Not personally, but by reputation. Maximilian Krieger was the CEO of Krieger Innovations, a predatory tech firm that specialized in hostile takeovers. He was known for buying stable, older companies, gutting them, selling off the assets, and leaving the employees destitute. He was a vulture in a handmade suit. And, as she knew from the files on her desk back in her tiny apartment, he had been trying, and failing, for 8 months to get a meeting with the von Strauss Legacy Fund. "Jenna," Chiara said, handing off the steak, "please take this to table 7. Mr. Dubois has just given me table 9. Jenna's eyes went wide. "Krieger? Oh, Chiara, good luck. He's a nightmare. Last time he was here, he made a busboy cry because he sneezed." Chiara simply smoothed her apron. "He's just a guest, Jenna. He's hungry. He's thirsty. That's all." But as she walked out of the kitchen, she knew that wasn't true. A man like Krieger wasn't just hungry for food. He was starving for validation, and he would devour anyone to get it. The hierarchy at table 9 was immediately clear. Maximilian Krieger sat at the head of the booth, expansive and dominant. To his left and right sat his 2 junior partners, men who mirrored his expressions and laughed a second too late at his jokes. But the 4th man was different. He sat opposite Krieger, quiet and observant. He was older, perhaps in his late 60s, dressed in a timeless, perfectly tailored tweed suit that probably cost more than Krieger's entire shimmering blue ensemble. He nursed a single glass of water, and his eyes, clear and analytical, missed nothing. This was Arthur Pendleton, the founder of Pendleton Capital, one of the most respected and feared venture capitalists on Wall Street. He was old money, a kingmaker. It was obvious that the entire dinner, the flashing watch, the booming voice, it was all a performance for this one, quiet man. Chiara approached the table. "Good evening, gentlemen. My name is Chiara, and I will be your server. May I begin with some water for the table? We have a sparkling mineral water from the Italian Alps, or our own in-house filtered still. Krieger didn't even look at her. He was busy gesturing expansively to Pendleton. And that's when I told the Henderson Global Board that their entire logistics chain was a joke. A complete, utter... What? He'd only just noticed her. He waved a dismissive hand, loaded with rings. Just bring water, whatever's most expensive, and a bottle of the 95 Petrus. Don't bother showing me the label, just bring it. And be quick about it. Right away, sir, Chiara replied, her tone perfectly neutral. She returned moments later with the water and a busboy, who carried the wine cradle. As she poured the water, Krieger continued his monologue, his voice a gravelly boast. The problem with these old European outfits, Arthur, is they're dinosaurs. They're sitting on dragons' hoards of cash, but they're too slow, too traditional to use it. They're terrified of risk. Pendleton took a sip of water. Some might call that prudence, Max. The dinosaurs ruled the earth for a rather long time. Until the meteor hit, Krieger laughed, slamming his hand on the table, making the silverware jump. And I'm the meteor, Arthur. I'm the one who sees the future. Take this von Strauss fund I've been trying to connect with. You know them, right? German, old world, stuffy as a museum. Pendleton's expression remained neutral, but his eyes flickered. I am aware of them. Exactly. Aware. Everyone is aware of them, but nobody's in with them. They're sitting on a leveraged potential of $500 billion. Easy. And they're investing it in municipal bonds and 100-year-old manufacturing plants. It's a crime. I've sent them 6 proposals for my new AI-driven arbitrage platform. Revolutionary stuff. And I get nothing back but a form letter from some clerk in Zurich. Perhaps they don't appreciate your direct approach, Pendleton suggested mildly. They don't appreciate profit, Krieger snapped. He caught Chiara's eye as she decanted the Petrus. You, girl, Chiara paused, the deep red wine breathing in the crystal decanter. Sir, this wine, it's the 95, correct? Not the 96. I'd know the difference, you understand. This is the 1995 Petrus, sir. From our reserve cellar, Chiara confirmed calmly. We'll see. He snatched the glass from her tray before she'd even offered it, swirled it aggressively, and took a deep, slurping drink, violating every rule of wine tasting. It's acceptable, he declared, setting it down. Now get lost. We're talking business. Of course, sir. I will return to take your food order shortly. As she walked away, she heard one of Krieger's partners whisper, Tough crowd, boss. Krieger's voice dropped, but it was still loud enough to carry. He'll come around. Old money just likes to be courted. You have to speak their language. Show them you're part of the club. By the end of this dinner, he'll be begging me to take his money. As for those von Strauss idiots, they'll realize their mistake soon enough. Everyone does. Chiara went to the service station, her back to the dining room. She closed her eyes for a single second, not in anger, but in calculation. She knew Maximilian Krieger's file by heart. His company was massively over-leveraged. He was bleeding capital on 3 failed acquisitions. He wasn't a meteor. He was a house of cards in a wind tunnel. He didn't just want the von Strauss money. He needed it. He was desperate. And desperate men, she knew, were always the cruelest. For the next hour, she served them with robotic perfection. She delivered appetizers, seared foie gras for Krieger, a simple beet salad for Pendleton. She refilled wine glasses, replaced dropped napkins, and cleared crumbs with a silver tool, all while maintaining a bubble of perfect, deferential silence. Krieger, meanwhile, grew louder and more obnoxious as the wine flowed. He was trying to impress Pendleton with his international credentials, which seemed to involve mispronouncing French dishes and bragging about a vacation home in Ibiza. Finally, the main courses were ready. Chiara and a second server, a young man named Leo, brought the heavy silver cloches. This was the restaurant's signature, the coordinated lift. "Gentlemen," Chiara said, positioning herself behind Krieger. She and Leo lifted the dome simultaneously. Krieger had the Wagyu tomahawk, a gaudy, oversized piece of meat. Pendleton had the pan-seared halibut, elegant and understated. Krieger, busy in his monologue about a brilliant deal he'd supposedly just closed in Germany, was gesticulating with his steak knife. As Chiara leaned in to place his plate, he didn't adjust. He swung his arm back, and his elbow connected hard with Chiara's side, just under her ribs. The blow sent a jolt of white-hot pain through her. She gasped, staggering back a single step, the heavy silver dome still in her hand. "Watch it!" Krieger barked, not even looking at her. He hadn't been hurt, but the interruption had annoyed him. "My God! Can't you people even walk straight? You nearly made me spill my wine." Chiara caught her breath. The pain was sharp. She was almost certain he'd cracked a rib. She'd been in her family's mandatory self-defense classes for years and knew the feeling of a solid impact. "My apologies, sir," she managed to say, her voice impressively even. "It was clumsy of me." She placed the dome on her tray and turned to leave. Krieger, emboldened by her apology and the wine, was furious at the perceived incompetence. He wanted to re-establish his dominance in front of Pendleton. He turned to his two junior partners, who both spoke fluent German. He leaned in, conspiratorially, and in a smug, sloppy, American-accented German, he spoke, his voice dripping with contempt. The words sliced through the air, sharp and ugly, despite the language barrier that shielded most of the room. "Bewegen Sie diese ungebildete Kuh aus meinem Blickfeld", Krieger sneert. "Ich kann mich nicht konzentrieren, wenn das Personal herumlungert. Sie hat wahrscheinlich sowieso meinen Anzug mit ihrem Schweiß beschmutzt." The translation was brutal. "Get this uneducated cow out of my sight. I can't concentrate with the staff hovering. She probably got my suit dirty with her sweat anyway." The effect on the table was instantaneous. The two German-speaking partners froze, their smiles evaporating. One of them, a man named Berger, looked physically ill, his eyes darting between Krieger and Chiara in abject horror. Arthur Pendleton, who did not speak German, simply raised an eyebrow, his gaze analytical. He recognized the tone of an insult, if not the words, and the sudden, suffocating tension. And Chiara stopped. She hadn't even taken a full step away. Her back was mostly to him, but she went absolutely, perfectly still. The entire dining room seemed to fall silent. Mr. Dubois across the room looked up, his professional radar sensing a critical failure. Krieger, oblivious, let out a short, barking laugh. He assumed his joke had landed, a private quip to his inner circle. He was the alpha, putting the help in her place. He speared a piece of his steak and shoved it in his mouth. A full 3 seconds passed. It felt like an hour. Chiara did not turn. She did not cry. She did not flinch. Slowly, deliberately, she set her silver tray down on a nearby service stand. The snick of metal on wood was the only sound. She turned around. She was no longer Chiara Benson, the timid waitress. The mask of deference was gone, vaporized. What stood there now was something else entirely. Her posture, always good, was now ramrod straight, radiating an authority that was ancient and absolute. Her eyes, which had been placid and neutral, were now a piercing, icy blue, locked directly onto Maximilian Krieger. She looked, for all the world, like a queen who had just heard a jester commit treason. Krieger, his mouth full of Wagyu, stopped chewing. His smug expression faltered, replaced by a flash of confusion, then annoyance. "What?" What are you looking at? I told you to go. Are you deaf too? He demanded in English. Chiara took one step back toward the table. She did not address Krieger. Not yet. She looked first at Arthur Pendleton. She gave him a small, almost imperceptible nod, as if apologizing for the display he was about to witness. Then she turned her full, undivided attention to Maximilian Krieger. The restaurant, the other diners, her manager, they all ceased to exist. There were only 2 people in the room. When she finally spoke, her voice was not loud. It was quiet, clear, and cut through the silence like a surgeon's scalpel. And it was in flawless, aristocratic Hochdeutsch, the pure, precise German of academia and old-world boardrooms, a German so perfect it made Krieger's sloppy attempt sound like a child banging on a piano. Verzeihen Sie, Herr Krieger, Chiara began, her voice resonating with a cold, clear power. Krieger's fork, halfway to his mouth, clattered onto his plate. His jaw went slack. His face, ruddy from wine and exertion, began to drain of all color. He understood. Chiara continued, her German precise and devastating. Ihr Akzent ist etwas neu. Ist schwer zu platzieren. Fast amerikanisch. Translation. Pardon me, Mr. Krieger. Your accent is a bit new. It is difficult to place. Almost American. It was a surgical strike. In the world of old European money, calling someone's accent new or American was a profound, deeply coded insult. It implied a lack of breeding, a lack of history. Krieger's partner Berger let out a small, strangled sound. Chiara's eyes did not leave Krieger's. But I must correct you on 2 points. She took a small breath. Erstens, she said, holding up one finger. Ich bin keine Kuh. Und zweitens, translation. First, I am not a cow. And second, she paused, letting the weight of the moment settle. Ich bin bei weitem nicht ungebildet. Translation, I am far from uneducated. She then delivered the coup de grâce, switching to a discussion of the very topic he had been boasting about. Zum Beispiel, she continued, her German accelerating in its fluency. Als Sie vorhin die BaFin-Regularien für Ihre geplante Übernahme in Deutschland erwähnten. Translation. For example, when you were mentioning the BaFin regulations for your planned takeover in Germany. Krieger's eyes widened in genuine shock. This was no longer a personal insult, it was an invasion. Sie haben Artikel 35 des Wertpapiererwerbs- und Übernahmegesetzes völlig falsch dargestellt. Sie sprachen davon, die Mindestangebotsschwelle zu umgehen, indem sie ihre Anteile auf 3 separate Offshore-Gesellschaften aufteilen. Das ist seit der Gesetzesreform von 2016 illegal. Die BaFin würde ihre Beteiligungen zusammenrechnen, ihre Absicht als Acting in Concert einstufen, ihr Angebot als feindlich deklarieren und ihre Stimmrechte einfrieren, bevor sie überhaupt den ersten Aktionärsbrief verschickt hätten. Translation: You completely misrepresented Article 35 of the Securities Acquisition and Takeover Act. You spoke of bypassing the minimum offer threshold by splitting your shares into 3 separate offshore entities. That has been illegal since the 2016 legal reform. The BaFin, Germany's financial regulatory authority, would aggregate your holdings, classify your intent as acting in concert, declare your bid hostile, and freeze your voting rights before you ever sent the first shareholder letter. She finished her evisceration and stood in the ringing silence. Maximilian Krieger was a statue of humiliation. He was a deep-sea creature dragged too quickly to the surface, his arrogance imploded by the pressure of sudden, unexpected expertise. His partners, Berger and the other, looked at Chiara as if she had just sprouted wings. It was Arthur Pendleton who broke the silence. He leaned forward, a look of profound, delighted interest on his face. He spoke in English. "Mr. Krieger," Pendleton said, his voice mild, "I seem to be at a disadvantage. I don't speak German. Would you be so kind as to translate what this young cow just said to you?" The use of Krieger's own insult, translated back into English, was a gut punch. Krieger stammered. It's nothing. A misunderstanding. This waitress is insane." "She doesn't sound insane, Max," Pendleton said, his eyes fixed on Chiara. "She sounds rather specific." He turned his gaze to Chiara. "Please, young lady, translate for the ignorant American at the table. What did you just tell Mr. Krieger?" Chiara turned, her demeanor shifting again. The icy German Baroness dissolved, replaced by a calm, composed, English-speaking professional. She sounded like she was addressing a boardroom. "Mr. Krieger was concerned that I was hovering, Mr. Pendleton," she said, her accent now a crisp, transatlantic blend of old New York and London. "He used a German pejorative to describe me as an uneducated cow." Pendleton nodded slowly. "I see. And the second part? The Baffin part?" "Oh, that," Chiara said, as if discussing the weather. "I was simply clarifying a point he'd made to you earlier. His strategy for a hostile takeover in Germany is based on a flawed and frankly amateurish reading of German federal law. The plan he outlined would not only fail, it would likely trigger a criminal investigation into market manipulation and land his firm on a regulatory blacklist." She looked back at Krieger, whose face was now a sickly, pale green. "It would," she concluded, "cost his investors, and anyone partnered with him, billions. It's a textbook case of hubris, and a simple Google search would have saved him the embarrassment." The silence in the restaurant was now total. Every diner in the vicinity had stopped eating. Mr. Dubois, the manager, was standing by the maitre d's podium, holding a stack of menus, his face ashen. Pendleton studied Chiara for a long moment. He'd seen sharks, killers, and geniuses in his long career. He wasn't sure which one he was looking at, but he knew she was extraordinary. "And how?" he asked, his voice full of genuine curiosity. "Does a waitress at L'Étoile Dorée come to possess such an intricate knowledge of German securities law?" Krieger, finding his voice, seized on this. "Yes! How? She's a spy! You're trying to sabotage me! This is a setup!" He pointed a trembling finger at Pendleton. You did this!" Pendleton ignored him completely. His eyes remained on Chiara. Chiara sighed, a small, weary sound. This was it. The end of her year. The end of her anonymity. She'd been 12 days from the finish line. She reached into the pocket of her black apron, the one she used to carry her corkscrew and spare pens. She pulled out something that didn't belong. It was a slim, impossibly elegant card case, made of brushed platinum. She slid it open with her thumb and retrieved a single, heavy-stock business card. It was cream-colored, with no logo, just simple, embossed, deep blue text. She placed it on the table in front of Arthur Pendleton. "I'm not a waitress, Mr. Pendleton," she said. "I'm an heiress, working a job. My name is not Chiara Benson." Pendleton picked up the card. He read the words, and his eyes widened. He let out a low, soft whistle. He looked up, not at Chiara, but at the apoplectic Maximilian Krieger. "Max," Pendleton said, a razor's edge in his voice. "You've been trying to get a meeting with the stuffy and dinosaur von Strauss Legacy Fund for 8 months, correct?" Krieger froze, a terrible, dawning comprehension spreading across his face. Pendleton tapped the card. "Congratulations, you finally got your meeting." He turned his gaze, now full of undisguised admiration, back to Chiara. "Ms. Chiara von Strauss," he said, reading her name aloud. Director of North American Acquisitions, von Strauss Legacy Fund. The name, von Strauss, dropped into the opulent silence of L'Étoile Dorée with the force of a gold bar hitting a marble floor. It was a name that didn't appear in gossip columns, but was whispered in the truly elite circles of global finance. The von Strauss family wasn't just wealthy. They were wealth. They had financed dynasties, backed entire countries, and survived centuries by being invisible, impenetrable, and unfathomably powerful. Krieger's two partners looked like they had seen a ghost. Berger, the one who had flinched at the insult, was now desperately, visibly, trying to distance himself from his boss, sliding his chair back inches at a time. Across the room, Mr. Dubois, the manager, felt his knees go weak. A von Strauss? Working as a waitress? In his restaurant? For a year? He'd been barking orders at her, critiquing her table-crumbing technique. The potential fallout, the diplomatic incident, was terrifying. Krieger, however, was past terror. He was in the red zone of pure, cornered animal rage. "Lies!" he roared, standing up so fast his chair screeched backward and toppled over. "It's a fake! A trick! She's a con artist! You think I'm going to believe this? This waitress is a von Strauss? They wouldn't be caught dead in a place like this unless they owned it." Chiara didn't even look at him. She was still addressing Pendleton. "My grandfather, Baron Heinrich von Strauss, stipulated in his will that I must work in the service industry under an assumed name for 1 full year before I could take my seat on the board. He believed that one cannot rule a world one does not understand. I had 12 days left." She gave a small, ironic smile. "It seems Mr. Krieger has given me an early retirement present." "I am speechless," Pendleton said. And it was true. He had thought he'd seen everything. "Your grandfather was Heinrich?" I knew him, slightly. He was a formidable man. He once told me my 5-year plan was a child's daydream. He was right. This personal connection, this casual mention of her legendary grandfather, was the final nail in Krieger's coffin. It proved everything. But, Krieger stammered, his fury collapsing into a pathetic, wheezing panic. He was now a pariah at his own table. "Ms. von Strauss," he tried, his voice suddenly sycophantic, greasy. I was joking. It was a test. Yes, a test, to see if the staff was alert. You passed, with flying colors. I was just joking with my men. Boys talk, you understand." Chiara finally turned her gaze back to him. The coldness in her eyes was absolute. "Herr Krieger," she said, her voice dropping back into that lethally polite register. "You are not a boy. You are a deeply indebted and unprofessional liability, and I do not understand you." She then did something that sealed his fate. She looked past him, to the other diners. "Mrs. Henderson," Chiara said clearly, her voice carrying. "A pleasure to see you again. I hope your husband's new biopharma fund is performing well. The initial reporting looks strong." A woman at a nearby table, the wife of the CEO of Henderson Global, looked up in surprise. "Chiara. Good heavens, is that you? I thought you were in Zurich. What are you doing in that uniform?" This public acknowledgement, this proof from another member of their class, was the final, devastating blow. Krieger was no longer just a fool. He was a public fool. Everyone now knew. The whispers started instantly. "That's Chiara von Strauss? Working as a... My God. Did you hear what that brute Krieger called her? He called her a cow, in German." Krieger's humiliation was now a spectator sport. He stood alone, his chair overturned, his face beet red, his multi-thousand-dollar suit suddenly looking like a cheap costume. Kiara turned back to the table. She looked at the two junior partners who were frozen in terror. "You, Mr. Berger," she said sharply, "you work for him. Your firm, Krieger Innovations, is currently in default on a bridge loan from a subsidiary of my fund. I was reviewing the file just last night." Berger went white. "Ms. von Strauss, I had no part in—" "You said nothing," Kiara cut him off. "And silence in the face of such behavior is complicity. Your company's credit line is now frozen, effective immediately. I will be calling my legal team in Zurich as soon as I am off shift." She then delivered the final shutdown, a masterpiece of corporate and personal annihilation. The name Kiara von Strauss was still hanging in the air, a fact that had not yet been fully processed. Maximilian Krieger was frozen in a state of cognitive dissonance, his mind unable to bridge the gap between the uneducated cow he had insulted and the dynastic name he had been chasing. But Kiara was not finished. She was not a person who enjoyed cruelty, but she was a person who despised bullies. This was not revenge, it was a reckoning. She turned her gaze from Krieger, whose face was a mask of disbelief, and settled on his junior partner, the one named Berger. The man flinched, as if she had shone a hot spotlight on him. "Mr. Berger," she said. Her voice was no longer icy, it was sharp, the precise tone of a senior executive addressing a failing subordinate. "You work for him, which means your firm, Krieger Innovations, is currently in technical default on a $17 million bridge loan. A loan extended, I'm afraid, by a subsidiary of my fund." Berger, who had been pale, now looked physically ill. He half stood, his hands raised in a gesture of surrender. "Ms. von Strauss, I had no part in— I didn't know— Kiara cut him off, her voice slicing through his stammered excuses. "You said nothing, Mr. Berger. You speak fluent German. You understood the insult. You understood his character. And you sat there in silence, hoping to profit from his association." She took a step closer to him, lowering her voice, which made it all the more terrifying. "In my world, silence in the face of such profound volatility isn't just poor manners. It's a risk assessment. It is complicity. It speaks to your own judgment, and I have judged it as fatally poor." She turned, just enough to include the entire table in her next proclamation. "As of this moment, your company's credit line is frozen. I will be on the phone with my legal team in Zurich to action the default clause as soon as I am off shift." Krieger finally snapped out of his trance. "You can't!" he roared, finding his voice again. "You can't do that. That loan is in good standing. We've made every payment." "It was in good standing," Kiara corrected him, her voice as calm as a frozen lake. "But you've just given me, as your primary creditor, cause to review your entire portfolio, and it is, as I suspected, a house of cards, a charade." She began to dismantle him, piece by piece, her words stacking up like articles of indictment. "Your firm is leveraged to a 20-to-1 ratio, Mr. Krieger. You are not a meteor. You are a balloon of debt, painted to look like a warship. You are drowning, and you've been pretending to be a swimmer." You're lying," he hissed, but the conviction was gone. He was guessing. She was not. "Am I?" she replied. "You have been issuing bullish, deeply misleading press releases about your quarterly projections to artificially inflate your stock price. All of this while you desperately seek a capital infusion to cover your catastrophic losses." She glanced at Arthur Pendleton, bringing him into the judgment. "The revolutionary AI platform you were pitching to Mr. Pendleton just an hour ago? It's vaporware, a shell. There is no proprietary algorithm. There is only a flashy user interface and your marketing budget. I've had my analysts in Berlin running a forensic audit on your code for the last month. It's a fraud." That's slander," Krieger shouted, his eyes darting to Pendleton, searching for an ally. He found none. "It's a fact," Chiara said, "which brings me to the German manufacturing company you are so desperate to acquire." A new, terrible light of comprehension dawned in Krieger's eyes. He was finally seeing the shape of the trap he had walked into. "You've been failing at that takeover for 6 months," Chiara continued, her voice clinical. "Have you ever wondered why your bid, which is grossly over market value, has been so systematically and quietly blocked? Have you wondered why your legal challenges meet a wall of impenetrable silence?" Krieger was shaking his head, a low, animal sound of denial caught in his throat. "It's because," Chiara delivered the killing blow, "they are majority owned by a private holding company in Luxembourg, a holding company that, in turn, is controlled by the von Strauss Fund, a holding company that I personally direct." The silence in the room was absolute. This was no longer a waitress shutting down a rude customer. This was a predator revealing to her prey that she had been the one herding him, invisibly, for months. "You," Krieger whispered, stumbling back a step. "All this time. You." "Me," she confirmed, with devastating simplicity. "You weren't attempting a hostile takeover, Mr. Krieger. You were attempting to pick a fight with my family, using money you don't have, to buy an asset I already own. Every one of your arrogant, sloppy proposals has been landing on my desk for the last 8 months, and I have been the one personally denying every single one." "Why?" he whispered. It was a pathetic, broken sound, the last gasp of his arrogance. Chiara's eyes were like chips of ice. "Because you are a bad investment, Mr. Krieger. You are erratic, you are sloppy, and your character is fundamentally deficient. I wouldn't trust you to run a lemonade stand, let alone a multinational corporation. Tonight, you simply gift-wrapped the proof and presented it to my most respected colleague." She nodded at Pendleton. "You are not a meteor. You are a child with a checkbook, and you are now in default." Arthur Pendleton, who had been watching this all with the keen, delighted interest of a man at a championship chess match, slowly and deliberately folded his napkin. He placed it gently on the table. He stood up. "Max," he said, his voice no longer mild, but carrying the cold, hard finality of a market maker. "This meeting is over. My fund will not be investing with you. Not now. Not ever." He paused, then added the final, crushing twist of the knife. "In fact, I believe I'll be shorting your stock first thing in the morning. This display is what we in the trade call material evidence of executive incompetence. Thank you for the tip." He then turned his full attention to Chiara, and his entire demeanor warmed, his eyes crinkling with undisguised admiration. "Ms. von Strauss, what a remarkable pleasure. I believe my partners and I have also been trying to get a meeting with you for 6 months. About our new green energy initiative. We were told you were unavailable." Chiara finally allowed that small, controlled smile to return. "I was rather busy, Mr. Pendleton. This apron is surprisingly demanding." Pendleton chuckled, a dry, appreciative sound. "I can see." He offered his own card. "Please, have your real assistant call my office. We will clear our entire schedule, any time, any place." "I will do that," Chiara said, taking the card. Pendleton nodded to her once, a gesture of deep respect, and walked away, leaving Krieger in the ruins of his own dinner. The loss of Pendleton, the loss of the loan, the loss of his reputation, the public exposure of his fraud. It all crashed down on Krieger at once. He was no longer a businessman. He was just a cornered, humiliated animal. He turned on Chiara, his face a grotesque mask of purple rage. "You!" he snarled, his voice thick and unrecognizable. "You ruined me, you bitch!" He lunged, his right hand raised high, not to slap, but to strike. It was a move of pure, spiteful, cornered violence. He didn't even get close. Before his hand was halfway through its arc, two forces moved with lightning speed. Mr. Dubois, who had been hovering in pale-faced terror, leaped forward with a surprisingly brave shriek, and the two large, impassive security guards by the front door, who had been watching the scene escalate with professional calm, crossed the room in 3 impossibly fast strides. They grabbed Krieger's arm mid-swing, spinning him around with a practiced, painful efficiency that twisted his expensive suit jacket. "Mr. Krieger!" Dubois snapped, his voice high and shaking, but energized by the intervention. "You will not accost." He looked at Chiara, then back at Krieger, his loyalty decisively and publicly chosen. "You will not accost my staff. You will leave this establishment. Now." Krieger held fast in the grip of the two guards, his arm aching, suddenly deflated. The rage vanished, replaced by the hollow, sick look of total and irreversible defeat. He was suddenly aware of the dozens of eyes, the sea of smartphones that were now silently recording. He was broken. "Let me go," he muttered. The guards eased their grip but did not release him. He fumbled for his wallet with his free hand, yanked out a thick wad of $100 bills, and threw them on the table. The cash scattered across the half-eaten plates. This isn't over," he spat, but the threat was weak, pathetic. It was a line from a movie, delivered by a man with no power, no credibility, and no future. The guards shoved him toward the door, pushing him through the center of the dining room. He stormed out, head down, pushing past the stunned hostess. His two partners, Berger and the other, scrambled to their feet, grabbing their briefcases. They scurried out behind him, not like executives, but like beaten dogs following their disgraced master, their own careers in flames. The restaurant was silent for a full 10 seconds. The only sound was the heavy glass door swinging shut. Then, quietly, at a corner table, someone started to clap. It was a slow, respectful applause. Mrs. Henderson joined in. Then Arthur Pendleton, who had paused at the door to watch the final exit, turned and added his own applause, a broad, satisfied smile on his face. Within seconds, the entire dining room, the richest, most powerful people in New York, was giving a standing, resounding ovation. They were applauding the fall of a bully. But most of all, they were applauding the quiet, unassuming waitress who had just proven herself to be the most powerful person in the room. The restaurant was suspended in a state of ringing silence, the echoes of Maximilian Krieger's humiliated exit still hanging in the air. Then, from a corner table, a quiet, aristocratic-looking gentleman in his 70s, a man Chiara recognized as a titan of old-world real estate, began to clap. It was a slow, measured, respectful applause. Mrs. Henderson, her eyes wide with a mix of shock and delight, joined in. Then Arthur Pendleton, who had paused at the restaurant's grand entrance, turned and added his own applause. Within seconds, the entire dining room, this curated collection of the wealthiest and most powerful people in New York, was on its feet, giving a standing ovation. They were not applauding a waitress. They were not, in truth, even applauding a von Strauss. They were applauding the sheer, undeniable, and beautifully executed justice they had just witnessed. Chiara stood in the center of the room, her composure a perfect placid mask. The pain in her ribs was a sharp, throbbing reminder of the man who had caused this. She had wanted to finish her last 12 days. She had wanted to walk out of this job as anonymously as she had walked in. But men like Krieger, in their arrogance, always chose their own endings. She gave a single, slight, dignified incline of her head. It was not a bow. It was an acknowledgement. As the applause died down, the diners, suddenly aware they were staring, returned to their meals. But the energy was forever changed. The night's gossip was set in stone. Chiara's gaze fell on the wreckage of Table 9, the toppled chair, the smeared plate of wagyu, the clattered, wine-stained silverware. Her training, ingrained over 364 days, took over. She walked over, picked up the heavy chair, and set it upright. She began methodically stacking the plates. "Ms. von Strauss!" Gerard Dubois, the manager, rushed over, his face pale and slick with a terrified sweat. He looked as though he'd just seen a deity in his own kitchen. "Please, you mustn't. I will have someone." He gestured wildly for a busboy who was frozen in place, afraid to approach. I cannot express my deepest, most profound apologies, Miss von Strauss. I had no idea. I treated you as... Chiara paused, her hands full of Krieger's dirty dishes. She looked at her manager, and for the first time in a year, her eyes were not just neutral. They were kind. "Gerard," she said, and the use of his first name made him flinch. "You have absolutely nothing to apologize for. You hired Chiara Benson based on her resume. You treated her fairly. You were a demanding boss, but a good one. You run an excellent restaurant." She had just given him an acquittal, and the relief that washed over his face was profound. She continued to stack the plates. "However," she said, her voice still quiet, "I do have to quit. I cannot, in good conscience, finish my last 2 weeks." A small, ironic smile touched her lips. "My year is up, effective immediately." "Of course, Miss von Strauss, of course. Anything. We will have your final paycheck." "No," she said, stopping him. She nodded toward the pile of cash Krieger had thrown on the table. It was a messy, insulting heap of hundreds. "That," she said, "will more than cover the bill and the disturbance." She walked over to the server station, where Jenna and Leo were huddled, looking at her as if she were a ghost. She picked up the cash, deftly counted out the amount for the check, and held the rest out. "Jenna, Leo," she said. Jenna's hand trembled as she looked at the money, then at Chiara. "Soph, are you... Who? This is for you and Leo. Split it, for putting up with all of that." She pressed the cash into Jenna's hand. "You were a good friend to me, Jenna." "Thank you." She gave her colleague a small, genuine wink. Then she turned back to Dubois, gave him a final, professional nod, and walked away from the dining room for the last time. She didn't go to the grand exit. She went through the swinging double doors, into the heat and clatter of the kitchen, and back to the small, cramped, windowless locker room she had shared with the rest of the staff. The transition was jarring. She left the world of gold leaf and whispers, and entered the world of bleach, old shoes, and stale coffee. This room, this identity, had been her entire reality. She opened her narrow metal locker. "Benson, S." Slowly, deliberately, she unfastened the black apron. It was heavy, not just with her corkscrew and pens, but with the weight of her year-long penance. She folded it into a perfect, crisp square and placed it on the bench. She unbuttoned the stiff black vest, her ribs aching with every movement. She unclasped her watch. It was a simple, digital, plastic-banded thing that cost $14. Its ticking had been the metronome of her servitude. She placed it in the locker. From the very bottom, beneath a spare pair of socks, she retrieved her real watch. A slim, platinum Patek Philippe. It had been her grandfather's. It was cold to the touch, and as she fastened it, its weight felt less like a timepiece and more like a crown. She changed out of the severe black uniform and into the clothes that had been waiting for this day, a dark, flawlessly tailored cashmere traveling suit. Finally, she pulled the pins from her hair. The severe, tight bun uncoiled, and her dark hair fell in heavy waves to her shoulders. The relief was instantaneous. She looked in the small, smudged mirror. Kiara Benson, the quiet, invisible waitress, was gone. The woman looking back at her was Kiara von Strauss. The mask was off. She took her apron, her uniform, and her plastic watch, and deposited them in the staff laundry bin. She left nothing of herself behind. She walked out of the service exit into the cold, damp Manhattan alleyway. The smell of garbage and hot steam from the vents hit her. It was the smell of the city she had come to know as a worker, not an owner. As if summoned by her very presence, a dark, unadorned, and terrifyingly expensive Maybach sedan pulled silently to the curb. It bore no special license plates, but its quiet authority was absolute. A man in a simple dark grey suit stepped out. He was not just a driver. He was Gregor, her head of security, a man who had been shadowing her, invisibly, for 365 days. He opened the rear door, his face a mask of professional calm. "Good evening, Ms. Kiara," he said, as if she were merely returning from the opera. "A productive night?" "You could say that, Gregor," she replied, sliding into the plush, silent interior. The heavy door closed with the sound of a bank vault, and the chaos of the city was gone, replaced by the scent of rich leather and the silence of absolute power. She leaned her head back, finally allowing herself to feel the sharp, throbbing pain in her side. A final, physical souvenir from Maximilian Krieger. A secure laptop and satellite phone sat on the console. She flipped open the laptop. It booted instantly, connecting to her private server in Zurich. Her inbox was already exploding. The first item was a news alert, flagged red for priority. Krieger Innovations, Kinvi, stock in pre-market collapse amid rumors of default, regulatory probe. The whispers from the dining room had become phone calls before she'd even changed her shoes. The market, her market, moved at the speed of light. The second was a secured email from Arthur Pendleton's private office. Subject, Green Energy. Ms. von Strauss, a pleasure. We are available tomorrow. All day. Our entire schedule is clear. The third was from the chairman of the Von Strauss Legacy Fund in Zurich. Subject, welcome home. Baroness, your gap year is concluded. We have been informed of the early termination. Your grandfather would be proud. The jet is fueled. We have much to discuss. Kiara closed the laptop. She looked out the tinted window as the car glided away from l'Étoile Dorée, leaving the gilded cage far behind. Her grandfather had sent her here to learn the value of $1, a simple, practical lesson. But she had learned something far more profound. She had learned the cost of a single, cruel word. She had learned the bone-deep vulnerability of people like Jenna and Leo, who had to absorb the insults of men like Krieger just to pay their rent. She now understood, in a way her grandfather never could have, the power she truly held. It wasn't just the power to buy and sell companies. It was the power to protect and the power to execute. The uneducated cow was now in charge of the entire pasture, and she was about to make sure that the wolves, the arrogant, the sloppy, and the cruel, were the first to be culled. Her test wasn't over. The real one had just begun. And just like that, with a few words of perfect German and a business card, Kiara von Strauss didn't just win an argument. She dismantled an empire. Maximilian Krieger learned the hard way what the truly powerful already know. Real class isn't about the watch on your wrist. It's about the respect you show to those who have none. He thought he was insulting a nobody. He was actually begging for his own destruction. What do you think was the most satisfying part of Krieger's takedown? Was it the public humiliation, the financial ruin, or the moment he realized who she truly was? Let us know your favorite part in the comments below. This story is a powerful reminder to never, ever underestimate the person pouring your water. If you loved this story of karma and justice, please show your support by hitting that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to see it. And most importantly, subscribe to our channel for more dramatic stories where arrogance gets the ending it deserves. Thank you for watching.